So we're going to talk about improvisation today. In particular, what I'm going to cover are ways to make your solos immediately sound more interesting for intermediate and advanced players. However, if you have just started doing this, the stuff in this video will immediately make you sound 10 times better. It's going to be difficult to practice for everyone, but that's the whole point. These are massive blind spots for a lot of guitar players. So what's blind spot number one? Well, blind spot number one is not doing enough application. Every single thing you do has to be application. And what I mean by that is if you're not playing over a track, if you're not recording yourself playing and analyzing it, if you're not going to a jam session and trying to play live like that, you're hamstringing yourself. Because those are the scenarios where you want to be able to improvise, and you have to expose yourself to them as much as possible to become familiar with it. So this is the same as pretty much anything, but don't just sit there and do a bedroom guitar solo over not much and no rhythmic background, and you're not trying to have any goals with it, you're just trying to play. All these things turn you into a very average, very boring player. So make sure you are trying to apply what you've done immediately. Next thing. Rhythmic interest is key here. So if you are someone who plays a lot of notes and knows all where the notes are, but your solos sound boring, this is probably why. I'm going to give you a really good demonstration of what a boring solo sounds like. Listen to this. Etc. So why does that sound just a little bit stilted, a little bit like I'm playing pentatonic line 1, followed by pentatonic line 2, followed by pentatonic line 3, etc, etc, etc. The reason is I am using a really obvious rhythmic pattern that I am playing on the beat all the time, so everything either lands on the beat or starts on the beat, and I'm also trying to land on the same notes a lot of the time. So that's a real summation of what's going on, but every time you play something that lands on the beat and starts on the beat, what ends up happening most of the time is you pigeonhole that phrase in a way that is incredibly difficult to then build another phrase on top of. When you do the opposite and you start thinking about where those offbeats can sit, suddenly you have a lot more fluidity in your playing. So here's the second example. I'm going to just try and start on the offbeats. Where in that solo was the start of all my phrases? Well, it's much, much more difficult to tell now because I'm thinking about things in a different rhythmic sensibility each time I start a phrase. And so the audience wants to listen to that solo because it's interesting, but they also can't really tell what I'm doing there. They can't tell how I'm structuring my solo through that. And the only thing that's changed there, there was no super fast lines, there's no articulation, all that kind of stuff. That's all, not there. But what only thing has changed is my rhythmic sensibility there. I'm trying to think about putting phrases on offbeats and trying to use those offbeats really well. So, point number 2 on this is thinking about what notes you're landing on. Get really familiar by ear. Again, this is all by ear. All of improvisation most of the time is about how you perceive music, whether or not that's rhythm, or all the tonalities you're using, etc, etc. It's not about knowing it on the neck. It's not about having all of this theoretical skill. All of that is all bollocks. You need ears for this. So what you can practice is, let's say we take the A Dorian scale. We pick some of the notes in here that we're not that familiar with landing on. Let's say the 4th and the 13th, for example, 11th and 13th. So these two notes. Those two notes, which are not places you would normally end a phrase. Let's try and end all my phrases on those. Get this very sort of tense sound. It's creating quite a lot of dissonance there. When I do that, it's not where you want to hear that land, but it also sounds pretty good because that tension is quite nice. If you do this with every single note in the scale, and sometimes what I like to do, a little bit more advanced here, is just pick one and land on it. So let's say we pick the ninth. Let's say we pick the third. Let's say we pick the seventh. That's the seventh, and then what happens if we pick the, I don't know, the fourth? You can see what I'm doing. I know where all those intervals are on the neck, and I can pick them out in phrases in real time. That requires one hell of a lot of practice. So again, one of the things to think about is, do you know what all of those intervals sound like? Yes, I know where they are on the neck, but that's not the important part. The important part is I know what the fourth sounds like, and I can make the fourth sound good. It is not about theory, this is about ears, and I cannot stress that enough. So, next point with this is talking about articulation. Okay, articulation is absolutely crucial to being an interesting guitar player. And what a lot of people do with articulation is they put it on the end of a phrase. So maybe they do something like this. Having a nice vibrato on the end of a phrase. Now don't get me wrong, that sounds killer. You need that kind of thing, but you should also think about, if I'm playing a phrase, how can I over-articulate this? Because you can never really over-articulate anything. If I have a phrase and I try and play it, can I use a load of slides, bends, vibrato in the middle of it? You get the idea. Like, I'm really trying to think there, less about the notes and more about... No, that's rubbish. Trying to really over-articulate the phrase I'm playing and put articulation on almost every note in it. As soon as you do that, you have a load of personality to what you're doing. Combine that with a really good rhythmic sense, and suddenly you've got really killer lines without actually learning how to play any lines. Like, even if it's just pentatonic stuff. Doesn't matter, it's all articulation, it's all rhythm and groove. So just make sure those are the things that you are putting first in your playing, not can I play my, dominant diminished over this and go outside and play all this nonsense. That's not important, it's something you can do, yes, but you have to learn all this stuff first. So, next thing with this, and this is probably the final point I'm going to make, is try and explore the neck a lot and try and put these limitations in place when you are exploring the neck to challenge yourself a little bit. So, for example, I'm in the tonality of A Dorian here. How do I challenge myself with A Dorian? Well, I think cage box wise, I've always been a cage player. I think the cage system gets a massive beating on the internet for no good reason. Most of the time it's because the people who try and say it's not very good are people who can't use it properly, so just bear that in mind. But if I'm using the cage system is all vertical, it's all boxes like this. That's all like your pentatonic boxes and moved up like that, etc, etc. So what I want to do is I want to try and make sure I can use the cage system horizontally. Let's pick a string set. Let's say we pick your E string, top E, and then your B string and the G string. So I'm just thinking this. Just those three strings. I'm going to try and improvise around the neck just using those three strings. Etc. Messed up a little bit there at the end, but that's just, again, a facet of recording all of this stuff. It's very difficult to do this stuff on the fly and then also try and demonstrate it in real time. That's why there's no edits in my videos as well. I like the challenge. So the point being, that is a really good way of trying to test yourself. And then I can just pick a different string set. Let's say D, G, B. etc. Right? Can I move that around the neck? Can I do that with ADG? Can I do that with, spread strings? You like something like E, D, and then you're not top E string, etc., etc. These are really good questions for you to be able to answer. And if you can do all of that, your improvisation improves quite dramatically because you just have a lot of real estate to explore with your lines. So that's one really important part of this. And the final point on this I want to really make is just lean into understanding your own habits. What are the things that you do all the time? What are the things that are your crutches for this system? Do you always start, whenever you play an A Dorian, for example, do you start in this pentatonic? Do you start there? Or do you start somewhere like... Do you start there, for example? What do you do all the time, and can you suddenly get out of that and try and force yourself to be a little bit more uncomfortable with using the neck, start in some slightly more unfamiliar places? Hopefully this has been a useful video. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see next from me on this, and also if there are any topics you would particularly like me to cover. Make sure you subscribe, and otherwise I will see you in the next one.